Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. An awful lot of talented young people go away to college and they never come back. My son is one of them. But my guest today went away to college and they came back. They didn't just come back, they did something else a lot of young people don't do. They got involved in politics. One of them was elected to the highest position in the city of Paducah, and another one was the second highest rank. Welcome to the program, Mayor Brandi Harless and Commissioner Sarah Stewart Holland.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you are familiar with the title of Thomas Wolfe's famous book, You Can't Go Home Again. But I ran across this quote. I never met a Kentuckian who wasn't either thinking about going home or actually going home.
Happy Chandler, right?
Happy Chandler,
I love that
exactly. So, what brought you two back to your roots? Mayor, we'll start with you,
Sure.
since you outranked the commissioner.
Oh, gosh. Only in political esteem, I guess. You know, I actually moved home on accident. I'm very honest about that. I did not mean to come home. I had a job in D.C. after grad school, and I didn't love it. I didn't like working in an office. I wanted to be working in what we call the field in public health. And so I ended up trying to move to Haiti. And my job in Haiti didn't work out, actually, thankfully, because 6 months later there was an earthquake. But during that time, I moved home. I thought it was going to be for a month. I thought I was going to be here looking for jobs everywhere else around the world. And things just started kind of sucking me in. And I started connecting with my family again in a different way. I started connecting with my old friends. Ended up starting to date who's now my husband, a high school friend of mine.
And a former student of mine.
And a former student of yours, that's right. And so over that time, and of course the story can be a lot longer than that, but I just kind of got sucked back in to being involved. And I admit also, for a couple of years, I was kind of, I always say one toe in, one toe out. I was here trying to be invested, but still looking for those opportunities elsewhere just in case. And things kind of happened in my life, and I decided to stick around, so.
Mine was not by accident. Mine was a dead, hardcore plan. I left Paducah when I graduated from high school. I went to school at Transy and then law school in Washington, D.C., got married to my college sweetheart who's from Atlanta. And we moved to D.C., and I remember vividly the moment when I thought, oh, I have to move home, which was when George W. Bush was elected to his second term. And he said, we pray for the power to meet our task, not the task to meet our power, in his acceptance speech. And I thought, I had been thinking a lot that I wanted to run for office eventually, and I was thinking through like, well, I loved DC, I've always loved DC. Well, I wouldn't want to run in DC, I don't love Maryland, I don't want to live in Virginia, those are not my home. And I thought, the only place I could ever represent with my full heart and the passion that it deserves is my home state of Kentucky. I'm an 8th generation Kentuckian. I love this state, it is deep roots here. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I have to move back. And so it was sort of in my periphery. And then for some reason convinced my husband to buy an apartment in DC. And then like the next year was like, I want to move to Paducah. He was like, that's great. And I was like, no, I mean, I got pregnant and I was like, I want to move to Paducah before I have this baby. And he a little bit thought I was crazy. And I wrote this he was like, think of all the things that have to line up for us to move to Paducah. And I wrote this little list, and it was like, get job, take bar, get pregnant, have baby, sell house, buy car, because we didn't even own a car. It was like this little on an index card, and I was like, no, it's simple. See, we just have to do these things. And he kind of rolled his eyes, and I just went about doing those things and checking things off the list. And now that little index card is framed and hangs in the hallway of our home, and we eventually just worked through it, and I convinced him to move to Paducah. And we took the bar. I always tell people that you say, I can never put into expression how much I love my spouse, but I know exactly how much my husband loved me because he took the bar again. And for anybody who's ever taken the bar, that is a serious undertaking. And so we took the bar and we checked things off the list. And here, 8 years and 3 kids later, here we are.
Both of you all are 35, I believe. Is that correct?
Are we the same age? I think I'm 35.
35.
Yeah, I just turned 30.
Yeah.
Did I just turn 34? I just turned 34.
Okay, she's younger than me.
34,
When'd you,
34.
In December.
When'd you graduate from high school?
2001.
Okay, yeah, she's younger than me.
Yeah.
99.
You all know the statistics that young people do not vote as often as we oldsters. Of course, I always told my students that's because as old as I am, that's all I can do is vote. But seriously, you look across the board, the older you are, the more apt you are to vote. The older you are, the more apt you are to be involved in politics and even run for office. But here you all are in your 30s. And again, I go back, I'm 67, when mayors were these old guys. And so how can you get young people to get involved in politics? It's not easy. So how do you do it?
That's a big question,
That is
Barry.
a big question. I think that for me, it was always a passion of mine. It's always something I was interested in. I don't think that is, what I tell people, like, I don't think it's a character flaw not to care about politics. There are things that affect my life that happen on the business page that I don't pay attention to. So I think that it just comes about for different people at different stages in life, and some people are fascinated by politics from a young age, and some people have a growing understanding of how it affects their life and become involved over time. It's an intimidating, I host a political podcast called Pantsuit Politics with a dear friend of mine, and we launched the podcast with the idea that it's an intimidating area, and we're very open about like sort of where our knowledge gaps are, and that there's no need to be intimidated. And so I think that thanks to a lot of things like the internet, particularly the internet, that people are becoming sort of less intimidated and they have access to that information. And hopefully as that changes and people become more involved in the process, we'll see people getting involved at younger ages. But, it's always been something I've been interested in, but I see that other people are intimidated by that area.
Mm-hmm. I was not always interested in politics at all. I really honestly wasn't interested in politics until the year before we did Emerge, which was 2014 or 13.
Let's talk about that, Emerge.
Sure.
You all are both products of Emerge.
We are.
So explain how that works.
Yeah, so basically it's a 6-month program. Once a month you travel across the state. It's held in different places across the state. And they teach you things like raising money for a campaign, how to do a marketing campaign, how to all kinds of things, how to build your platform, field organizing, all of those things. And so Sarah, actually, we didn't know each other that well until we did that together. And so then we started traveling together. We were the only people from Paducah at the time doing it. And so we traveled together, got to know each other in that way. And then at the end, this is a great story. So at the very end of the session, you do a stump speech about the office you think you might run for someday. And then you sign this piece of paper and it says, I vow by X date to run for X office. Okay?
You get 5 years.
Well, I didn't take that very seriously, honestly, in the moment. I did not. And everyone in your class signs it, okay? So up until that day, I had been thinking that I was interested in the legislature, only because I was doing the Emerge program out of curiosity, not out of this like deep-seated conviction that I should run for office someday. I was just curious about how it worked. I knew so little about politics at that point. And so when I got to that day, I kind of did some soul searching on the way to Frankfurt and realized that legislature just wasn't my thing right now. I'm good at community organizing. I'm good at consensus building at CEO level kind of stuff. And so in the moment that I was about to do my stump speech, I changed my mind. And I did a stump speech based on being mayor. And then I signed mayor on this piece of paper for 2016. And not until after I decided I was running, did I find the picture of that piece of paper.
And mine said city commissioner
and hers said city commission. So it was this kind of process of, getting the statewide support of other women who are thinking about running for office. It kind of builds this deep-seated confidence that you're not the only one thinking about it, that it's not this monumental task necessarily. It can be an achievable thing. And so I think that a lot of that experience is what helped me earn that kind of confidence and willingness to put my leg out there. Because most people in the community are afraid of it. And so when all you're surrounded by is that fear, you yourself kind of take on that fear. And so having the Emerge and then having, Sarah in our community to kind of help, both of us saying, okay, are you ready to run? Is it time to run? Really helped us kind of put ourselves out there.
Because I think the other thing to think about is not just that, for me, is not just our age, but it's also the fact that we're both women. And that what spawned me going into Emerge was watching this documentary called Raising Miss President, which was is about women running for public office. And even though I was a woman who had always been passionate about politics, even though I was a woman that had considered running from a young age, I watched that documentary and I realized that I had internalized all these messages, and they were not particular to me, but they were what women all over the country tell themselves. I'm not old enough, I'm not experienced enough, I don't have the right experience, my kids are too little, all these different messages. And when I watched that documentary, it was consciousness raising in the purest sense of the word. I saw it and I thought, oh my gosh, these aren't my personal challenges. This is what we all tell ourselves. And we have to stop telling ourselves that if we want to see more women represented in government. And so people had mentioned Emerge to me before, and I just kept thinking, well, it's not the right time, it's not the right time. And I watched that documentary and I was like, you know what? It's never going to be the right time. It's never going to be the perfect time. I had a baby and everything, and I did it.
Emerge is a program to encourage women to run for public office. Is it an adjunct to the Democratic Party?
No, it's not connected to the Democratic Party. It's its own separate organization. They do mostly train Democratic women, though, so that's who they're recruiting. Yeah.
Who are some other Emerge graduates that you can name that we would know? In the legislature, maybe, or
Atticus Scott.
And Mackenzie Cantrell was just elected.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Judge Henschel went through the program locally. And anybody else? I can't think of, there's tons, but I can't think of any other top of my head.
Well,
it's a fantastic program.
You talk about experience. Of course, you ran against an incumbent, and Gerald Watkins, who we all know. Gerald says the real winner in elections is the incumbent party, something like 90-something%. So was that sort of a daunting task to take on an incumbent mayor? I mean, here you've come into town, you've gone away and come back, and you're taking on an incumbent mayor. So what made you decide to do that?
My husband and Alan Rhodes,
Okay.
both of them together, talked about this probably for 6 to 8 months before we had to file our paper. I mean, I filed my paperwork 2 days before the deadline, I think it was.
So you were a little hesitant to do this?
Oh, yes, absolutely I was, yes. And Alan was pledging his full weight behind me. And really, Alan recruited me because he was being asked to run for mayor. He kind of set himself apart on the commission as the guy who's asking all the hard questions, and people kept asking him. He said, Brandi, I want you to know I'm not the mayor type, you are. And I didn't really believe him for a while, although I had signed my name on this piece of paper 2 years before that I would consider it. And honestly, that made the biggest difference in the world for a young person, speaking about how to get young people involved, to have someone with that kind of authority and recognition and credibility in our community to come behind me and say, I'm putting my full stamp. Whenever we knocked on doors, he called it the good housekeeping stamp of approval. And that made all the difference in the world. I would not have won that election without Alan Rhodes. There's no way around it. So that's all to say, this isn't just about begging young people to be involved. It's about getting behind them 100% and actually believing that they can do the job. And I think that made all the difference in the world for sure.
And of course, this was your first run for office too. And lots of times people run once or twice and keep going, but you made it the first time out of the box.
I'll never forget the very first door I knocked on in the primary behind my house. This wonderful little lady opened the door, and she was very kind and nice, and she said, well, you probably won't make it your first time. And I thought, I'm cursed. Like, I've done this, I'm cursed, it's never going to happen. But it's really thanks to the training I received at Emerge. It gave me resources and just the understanding that this is what it takes, and this is what, don't make these mistakes that other people make, and just getting out there and knocking on doors. I'm knocked on over 5,000 doors, and that was huge. And I think that made all the difference in the world for people to meet me and get to know me firsthand, and to see that I cared enough and that I was dedicated enough and that I wanted it enough to go out and knock on those doors. And it was such a blessing, and I'm so grateful that I did make it the first time, because it would have been very discouraging to knock on 5,000 doors and leave.
Well, that's the thing. The thing about politics is somebody loses, and you spend all this money.
Other people's money. That's what bothered me. That's what gave me the biggest heartburn.
And I remember I've been involved in a few campaigns here and there, and a lot of people detest the idea of hitting people up for money. Now, you know, when I worked, I didn't want to hit somebody for $5 for lunch, but you're talking lots of money, even in a city race, more money than people imagine. So how do you do that? Do you just come back and say, it's me again, or do they screen your calls, or what?
Well, I was really lucky because I did not have to do any call time, just cold calling people and asking them for money, because partly because of my experience in politics before in Washington, D.C. I had a lot of friends who didn't even live in Paducah who supported me and knew what it took to run for office and wrote the checks. And I have, because of my experience in sort of the online space as a blogger and a podcaster, I had a really great network on Facebook and online, and I would just put out pleas, and I would get donations over the internet, which was really great. But I'm also a person that I fully understand that I got lucky, and should I decide to run again, that probably won't always be the case, and I will have to make those calls. And for me, I don't really mind asking. I'm just a person that I realize I am the exception that proves the rule, but I don't mind asking the worst. Somebody, my stepfather was in sales, and he raised me to believe that the worst thing somebody can tell you is no. And I sort of live my life by that. But it's more for me, it wasn't the asking, it's the responsibility once I received it, that like, I don't want to let these people down. That was what was the hard emotional work for me.
Well, I did not have that coming with me necessarily. Some of my family has been in politics, so I definitely had those kind of connections, which was very helpful, absolutely. And I asked a few friends to raise a little bit of money for me, but I was doing the calling. Two things kind of had to happen for me to kind of stomach doing it. One, I had to create the real vision behind why I was running in the first place and what I could accomplish. And honestly, that stuck with me to today. I have this platform card that I keep in my office because here's the other thing. Our generation is having to change the definition of what it means to be a politician.
So true.
I mean, I firmly believe that I hope that we bring back the term public servant someday, because that is my intention every single time. And so I have that card on my desk saying, all right, Brandi, you knocked on people's doors. You asked people to, give you $1,000 sometimes to support this mission and this vision. Then you better go after it, because that's what you said you would do. And so I had to really buy myself into it. Honestly, it took me probably 3 or 4 months at the very beginning to really even hear enough feedback from people to even formulate what that looked like. So that was number one. Number two was I realized there was a lot of momentum happening around in young people in the grassroots part. And I really tried to reach in and leverage that because, we are carrying the torch for being the example for young people, but even more so, we're carrying the torch of paving that pathway and giving access to the government, access to being a politician. And so that was always in the back of my mind. How am I not just doing this for Brandi Harless in the city of Paducah, but how am I doing it for other young people to be able to be involved as well? So several of my friends knocked on doors. They had never knocked on doors before in their lives. They absolutely enjoyed it, right? You're getting out and meeting neighbors.
It's such a bad rap.
It is. It really is.
It's really fun. And that's the thing, too. You don't just have to ask for money. You have to ask for people's votes. And that felt the sort of responsibility on election night of thinking all these people voted for me and all these people trusted me and I cannot let them down. It's a very intense feeling and intense sort of realization. But you do. And I remember when I first declared, or if we first filed in the primary, I would find myself, people would say, I saw you filed, and I would say, yeah, I'm really excited. And I had to force myself to say, yes, I'm really excited, and I hope I have your support, to ask for people's support and to ask for people's vote, because you really, really have to. But even as somebody who's not sort of intimidated by that process, I still had to sort of warm up to it and remember, no, I have to ask for people's support. I have to ask for people's vote. That's essential. And every time you knock on the door, it's sort of tempting to let that part of the script go and to just sort of stop and hope you have a nice day, instead of, I hope I have your support. I'm the last on the list because I was the bottom of the ballot. So it was to say that every time, but it's so important.
Obviously, now that's an old-fashioned way of campaigning. That's pressing the flesh. That's getting out there and meeting the folks. But you also, I know you all are involved with Facebook, and you mentioned the term podcast. Now, I'm 67 years old. To me, a podcast is something maybe involving a P or something. I don't know. Of course, the whole idea of social media, I'm an old newspaper reporter, and to me, social media is a bunch of reporters in a bar after the paper's put to bed drinking. This is a whole new aspect of campaign. I know President Obama was the first person to really use extensively the social media, And you hear about this on the national level, running for president or a congressman or a senator, but you all brought this down to the local level. So how did that figure into your campaign, just the nuts and bolts of this Facebook, which obviously don't do it anyway, you know?
I want to answer this first, if you don't mind, because we actually had this battle a couple times between, we would call each other and say, okay, what's your strategy? What's your strategy? What are we doing? What are we doing? And at some point, like, there was some pushback. Sarah went really all in on purchasing Facebook ads and buying ads, while, my opponent and her opponents were buying billboard ads. And we really had to get honest with ourselves.
Now, that's the old way. Billboard is the old way.
It's the old way, that's right.
Right.
And I think what was so great was we were able to kind of bring ourselves down and just say, what are our real intentions and our real goals? Who are we really going after here? Who do we really want to reach? And at the end of the day, honestly, the social media and the knocking on doors became like the two main things, because we realized we knew who our audience was. We knew knocking on, I will never forget Judge Leeper and his stories. He was kind of the one locally that did it first and said, this matters, we're going to do this. And hopefully we won't let that die.
Years ago, Dan Walker ran for governor of Illinois. They call him Walking Dan. He literally walked the state from Metropolis, Cairo, and Brookport all the way to Chicago.
It's a long state.
It is. And so, but the idea of going door to door, Gerald Watkins is a firm believer in going door to door. That personal contact is so important.
But what I did is I never knocked on doors that I did not post on Facebook that I was out knocking on doors. They were always two pieces that went together. I did not step out of my door and knock on a single. I posted about dogs I helped find. I posted about people's street numbers that were made out of mosaic tiles that I liked. Every single day that I went out and I knocked on doors, I posted. Because, and I wanted to just keep reinforcing that narrative, because it wasn't just for the people because I didn't talk to everybody. Everybody didn't open the door. Or some people's, door flyers got blown off in the wind, and they might have known I never knocked on their door, but they knew I was out there knocking, and they knew that narrative. The social media just helped amplify the actions that I was already doing. And with Facebook and the money, I spent significantly less than people told me I needed to spend. And the way I was able to do that was Facebook, because newspapers are wonderful, but I'm reaching a lot of people who cannot vote for me. They don't live in Paducah. They don't work, maybe they just work in Paducah, or they don't vote regularly. Whereas because of the way the technology is now, I know the list of people that vote and vote regularly. And I can take that list and put it on Facebook, and they're going to see my ads. And I'm paying for ads that aren't going to go to other people that can't vote for me. So it's a much more efficient use of your dollars. And sort of what I said is, like, these lessons that I learned and these strategies I take in campaigning are the same ones I'm going to take to city government. Like, let's be smart. Let's use our dollars efficiently. Let's not waste money on things that aren't reaching the goals or the people we want to reach.
Well, the art of campaigning fascinates me. Of course, I've taught Kentucky history for years, and it's, back in the day it was stump speaking. Not so much of that anymore, and which is one of my favorite topics, is old-time Kentucky political stories. And Judy and Carol told me years ago that television killed that, that you can't tell a stump speech in 30 seconds or a minute.
I don't know. I think the debates and the moments where we were really able to get in front of people and speak in a more extended way helped.
Talk about the debates. What part did the debates play in your victory, do you think?
I think they were huge.
Oh, they were huge, yeah. Well, I really will firmly believe that my pivotal moment was the chamber breakfast debate. I had people come up to me that have known me for years, my Entre Paducah days, working in the chamber and things like that, who said, Brandi, I want you to know, I know you, and I know you're smart and all of those things, but not until today did I see you as being my mayor. They were having a hard time getting this young blonde girl to become a visual of their mayor. And that one sent me over the edge. I will always give credit to that, because I do think it was the day that people saw me standing up there with authority, with critical thinking, with all of those things, and kind of shifted in their minds. And then we had many, many, many community debates, which, you know what, I said this every time. I was so impressed with the amount of engagement that our community had in our local election. It would be easy for people to feel so overwhelmed with that national election that was going on and just to ignore it all. Yeah. But instead, our community channeled their energy back locally and said, this is where we're going to get the stuff done. And I give so many people in our community credit for doing that.
Totally.
What was the percentage of turnout in Paducah, do you know, in the election?
And the general, I think it was pretty high, wasn't it? Like 50, 60?
It was in the 60s.
It was pretty high.
You should know this, Barry.
I
Yeah.
don't. I'm afraid.
Where's
I
Daniel?
confess. I don't. But still, 60% is still, compared to other countries, not very high. Why do people not vote? And I noticed this is when I taught, and I would tell students, and I did not push my politics on anyone, but I said, you kids, where do you think tuition rates come from? I don't know. It comes from the legend. Everything you do comes from government, and who you vote for, whoever you vote for, it's going to affect that. There's still this big disconnect. And that's a question I don't think anybody can answer, is how do you get people to understand that in a democracy, everything is political? I know that's a dirty word, politics, but it's political.
I mean, I think that I firmly believe, I live my life by the philosophy that everybody's doing the best they can. And I think that there are a lot of complex reasons that people don't vote, from the fact that they can't get off work, or that they are caring for people, or they are
In Europe, they vote on Sunday.
struggling in all kinds of things. And there's a lot of ways in which the way we vote could be improved. And I also think that people make decisions about politics in the same way they make decisions about everything in life. We're rational animals, and we make emotional decisions. And I think that we have to acknowledge that and not think that everybody has complete information, or they're processing the information the same way, or that if they don't have that information, there's something wrong with them, or they're not smart, or their priorities are incorrect. I think that it's complicated. Human beings are complicated, and the reason they do anything is complicated, including the reasons they don't vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too, for me personally, even like you just said, making that connection that everything you do ties back to some kind of legislation. It took me a long time to figure that out in my life. I mean, it wasn't until I really started engaging in politics in Kentucky that I even understood that on a real deep level. And now I've said probably 20 times in the last 89 days I've been in office, it matters who sits in the seat. It matters who sits in the seat.
And I think
I haven't really internalized that until now that I'm living it.
And I think going back to students who are young, obviously, it just simply doesn't occur to them that what goes on in Washington and Frankfort and Paducah City Hall and McCracken County Courthouse has a direct effect on their lives.
Well, and think about how we talk about politics as adults. Think about how many times in my life that first of all, you're taught polite people don't talk about politics or religion. And you're taught, the women in my family would shut political conversation. We're not going to talk about that. That's going to make everybody uncomfortable. It's built up as this negative, conflict-driven area. And I think particularly, if for women who are taught not to look for conflict and to avoid conflict, it's really difficult. And I think until we change the way that we talk about politics across the dinner table and with our children, are we going to see real engagement from younger people? And I think, that's what I try really hard with my own kids.
I have to invoke cloture here because we're out of time.
Oh, well.
When I was a newspaper reporter, it was great. We could just go on and on, but with TV, So.
Yeah.
My guests today were Mayor Brandi Harless and City Commissioner Sarah Stewart Holland. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.